So I'm very pleased to welcome Cecilia Skingsley, first Deputy Governor of the Riks Bank in Sweden, Thomas Moser, alternate member of the Governing Board of the Swiss National Bank, and moderator Professor Dr. Philipp Sandner from the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center to discuss this topic. So welcome to everyone, and Philipp, please take over.
Yes, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's also a pleasure for me to moderate this panel. Today we are talking with two central banks which are at the forefront of developing central bank digital currencies. That's basically digital money issued by a central bank. And even more so with Thomas and Cecilia, we are also talking to people who are at the forefront within their organization. So it's a pleasure to talk with you. Maybe everybody of you, Thomas and Celia, you please present yourself quickly. What's your viewpoint on this? What are your current projects? What's the background of your organization? Maybe ladies first. Cecilia, I would like you to start quickly presenting you and your organization.
Oh, thank you, Philip. Hello, Thomas, and the rest of you. It's good to make this presentation from Stockholm. And as you already know, probably the Riks Bank has been investigating a concept called the e-krona, which is our version of what is more generically has been called CBDC. We started this 4 years ago, and I'd like to start saying a few words about the technical aspects of this project, and then sort of take a step back and talk a little bit about the reasons for why we do this, and also the way we think about it way forward. And before we start, just like to get one thing out of the way, which is that although we are exploring this issue, the Riks Bank has not decided to issue an e-krona. We are still in the phase when we are investigating different options. So the Riks Bank is building a proof of concept for an e-krona, and we are doing this in order to get a better understanding of how an e-krona could work in reality and what trade-offs there are in choosing between different properties or functionalities. We have been doing this proof of concept for a little more than a year, and we have technical support from Accenture, and the technology we use is the DLT called Corda. And the reason for why we use Corda is not that we necessarily think that Corda is the best and optimal choice for an eventual future e-krona, but when we did our procurement process, the proposal from Accenture based on Corda we found was the one that fitted our criteria the best. And we're working in some interactions with the private sector. So last month we had meetings with both banks as well as the fintech companies to update them on where we are in the project, and also, more importantly, invite a few of them to actually test the prototype in a more realistic environment. So then let me take a step back that I promised to you earlier. Why are we investing so much resources and efforts into an e-krona if we actually don't yet know whether it will be launched or not? And the short answer to this question is that we think we have to. You are probably all familiar with the rapid digitalization in Sweden. It's probably one of the most digitized countries in the world. This has a lot of benefits, but one of the consequences is that we can see, and we saw this, and that was a starting point a couple of years back, that the use of cash is rapidly developing into becoming among the lowest in the world. So you can say that as an expert authority when it comes to money and payment, we sort of are at crossroads. You can take one path where we do nothing, and this would, extrapolating current trends, lead to a sort of cashless society where central bank money is no longer available to the general public. And no one has really experienced this. If you look through history, there is nowhere we can see and learn how a situation where money and payment methods is only issued through the private sector. Taking the other road, on the other hand, where we launch an e-krona, that would be in a society with a central bank digital currency, and no one fully knows how that works yet either. So these societal changes, the technological developments that has been heard at this very prominent conference, this just forces us to investigate a CBDC. One sort of cornerstone in this that we think is very important is that general public's access to central bank money is an important feature. There are a couple of reasons for this, but central bank money has a unique property of being risk-free and liquid. And commercial bank money, on the other hand, and also other private money, they come close, but they are not a perfect substitute to central bank money. And the possibility that the general public can convert their commercial bank money into central bank money at par whenever they like it, we think is an important function that sort of underpins the confidence in money and the monetary system. So it's a side like a finishing stone that sort of keeps the whole thing together. And if we're going to change that, it should be done in a measured way and not just happen. We also think that in the case of Sweden, an e-krona could positively contribute to two vital society objects. The first being a resilience in the retail payment market, and second, to promote competition in the retail payment market. If you think about it, in a situation with physical cash gradually being marginalized, there will be no default option to use as a payment method at point of sales that are independent of power and communication. And here we think that the public sector has the most important role to play when it comes to providing offline services. An e-krona could function offline for some time and help overbridge periods of communication and power outages. And we think the public sector has the main interest in making the resilience working, and this we think we should play a part in that objective. And when it comes to competition, we think there are two aspects. First, an e-krona could be a payment infrastructure open also to non-bank payment service providers. The non-bank payment service providers today has to go through banks and use and dependent on bank-owned infrastructures. An e-krona sort of built by the private sector, building an open infrastructure, could therefore help level the playing field and be a platform for an ecosystem of payment services. Secondly, also, safe central bank issued money available to the general public. It used to compete with bank deposits for a broad range of payments. Technological change and new and efficient payment services has reduced cash to only be viable at the point of sale and person to person. And in Sweden, the cash has also vanished more or less from these segments too. And this means that, as I said before, in practice, there are no alternatives to bank deposits when you want to make payments. And consequently, there is a lack now of effective competition regarding the form of money. And payment services in the payment industry, you can see that there are strong economies of scale and network effects there, and that is usually not a very optimal recipe for efficiency and low prices. There is also an important historical aspect here. For thousands of years, it's been one of the state's sort of core activities to provide efficient forms of money. First, it was usually done by a king, later by central banks. And if the state, public sector as a whole, withdraw and leave the whole payment market to the private sector, I think it's important that it should be a result of a public debate and political decisions and not through any sort of Darwinistic way. So the way I see it, I see just issuing a general purpose CBDC is not that radical or nothing truly new. It's just a continuation of the central bank's historical role when it comes to fulfilling the traditional mandate of providing a good version of money to society.
Okay, if I may, Cecilia, I would like to also give Thomas time to also present himself and also his project running at the Swiss National Bank, if I may. And then I will come back to you with questions going a little bit deeper. Thomas, you would like to take over and also present a perspective of the SNB in Switzerland.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Hi, Cecilia. I'm impressed with your background. I don't have such a nice background as you have, so this is only my own study here. So I think Cecilia already mentioned a lot of important questions and issues for central bank. In Switzerland, unlike in Sweden, we are not so much pushed from the retail side. So cash is not vanishing, certainly not to the extent that it has been in Sweden. We are more pushed from the wholesale side. So in Switzerland, it's the most important financial market infrastructure provider, SIX, which also runs the Swiss stock exchange, that has decided to start a digital exchange probably this year. They will probably go live this year. So the question for us came up, how do we view that they will use a stable coin, that they will use their own private money as a form of payment on this digital exchange. Now, right now, and probably also for the next few years, this digital exchange will probably not be systemically important. We expect that there will be a relatively small start, but it could grow into a systemically important infrastructure. And at the latest, then I think the question comes: how do you make payments on this blockchain? And Cecilia has mentioned it's the only riskless monetary asset in the economy is central bank money. It doesn't have any credit risk involved. So it would make sense to have settlement on the blockchain of the Swiss Digital Exchange in central bank money. And that's why we did our pilots. And just like the Riks Bank, these are just pilots. So there is no decision to go live with these wholesale CBDCs that we have been experimenting with. But that's exactly what we did together with SIX, together with SDX, that we issued a wholesale CBDC on the blockchain that will be used for the Swiss Digital Exchange. And we did publish the results of that project together with the BIS in December. It's called Project Helvetia. So people who are interested in it can look up the videos and the material that's on the homepage of the Swiss Innovation Hub of the BIS in Basel. So this is the situation in Switzerland. We are continuing now experiments. But as I said, Swiss Digital Exchange will go live probably this year as soon as they have the license from FINMA. But they will start with their own stable coin at this stage, because we have not taken any decision yet whether we will issue a wholesale CBDC on the Swiss Digital Exchange. So back to you, Philipp.
Excellent. Heard Thomas, who has done experiments and who is doing experiments in the area of wholesale CBDCs. That's basically allowing access to the Swiss franc on behalf of financial organizations. Plus, Thomas, you also mentioned it, there is another way of putting digital money available or putting digital money on a blockchain system, that would be issuing commercial bank money. That's what you mentioned at the end of your introduction. That's basically money issued, for example, by the SDX to their customers. So it's a complex scope, and it's interesting to have this discussion because both of you had made the decision to go into various directions. Thomas, you went in the direction of wholesale CBDCs, and Cecilia, you and the central bank in Sweden went in the direction of retail CBDCs. Maybe both of you, could you elaborate a little bit on the question, why did you focus on this specific domain? So why, Cecilia, did you focus on retail access and not so much on wholesale access? And Thomas, the other question way around, why did you not focus on the retail side?
So why are we looking into this from a retail perspective? Well, as I said, our starting point was actually that the cash usage in Sweden fell very rapidly. We're now have a value of money in circulation is below 1% of Swedish GDP. Most countries are 5, 8, 10. I think Japan is up at one of the top ones at 20% of their GDP. So we are an outlier, and we seem to be on the forefront in terms of the citizens adopting to digital payments, and we are happy with that. But we want to be able to provide, we think, the role of the central bank in terms of make sure that the payment system and the payment services are safe and efficient and is based on innovation. And the problem we're seeing here is that given the high economies of scale and networks effect with the current services and the current companies, we want to make sure that there is an efficiency aspect that is being satisfied, but we also are very prioritizing the trust issue, that this finishing stone, as I said, the fact that you can change between central bank money and commercial bank money at par, we think is an important feature. When it comes to wholesale side, there are things to be done there as well, but Thomas and the SMB are definitely ahead of the curve. So I'll leave the floor to Thomas to talk more about it.
Yes, please.
Yeah. We were also, a little bit pushed into this project. If SIX wouldn't have started to go ahead with the digital exchange, I don't think we would have been so quick in taking up this issue. So we are also a little bit challenged here on the wholesale CBD side. And I think that the reason is just that, as I mentioned, if you have an important infrastructure, you would like to reduce the risks as much as possible. And paying with central bank money on a important infrastructure based on the DLT is just less risky than when you have a stable coin where you have, apart from the credit risk that you have against the issuer, also the credit risk of the custodian. So you might have actually even more risks involved than with traditional commercial bank money. So I think that was really the reason why we started to think about this issue.
So you Thomas, you elaborated on the demand of the industry, in this case, the SDX. Then you basically set together, and from the supply side, you then basically found this kind of solution at the end, working together with the private sector and the public sector. That's how it sounds like. Will the wholesale CBDC you are prototyping, will this also be running on a DLT system? And if so, is this already decided? Which solution will it be?
Yeah, so here we had it a bit easier again than the Riksbank because SIX already came with a DLT. So we were not involved in the selection of the DLT. So basically our task was just how to issue central bank money on the DLT on which SIX is building its digital exchange. And just like in Sweden, it's actually also Corda. So it's the same technology that is used by the Riksbank.
Okay, interesting. So it's the same technology. And then another question for Cecilia. How, if I would be a Swedish citizen, right? How would I have to envision the future? Would I have to download, for example, an app from the App Store, which is then an app being created by the central bank, such that I can pay my daily food, my espresso, my pizza with an app created by the central bank? Or would it be money being somehow pushed into other people's systems, for example, pushing your digital krona into existing online banking systems? How would this be visible or envisioned from the perspective of a Swedish citizen?
Well, it remains to be seen because you can't make technological changes without making the legislation up to date with the technology. And the Riksbank Act was written in the foundations of it was written in the 1980s. And this was long before digital revolution, and we can even picture a society without cash. So what we have done is that we want our mandate to be clarified in this area. So we have asked the Swedish Parliament, where we asked for a broader inquiry into the state's role in the future digital payments market and the role for the public sector, and also what the legal tender status for both physical and digital central bank currency should look like. And just recently, the government called for head of this inquiry commission and clarified its mandate. And this inquiry will work until November 22. So we will have to wait for the legislation suggestions. But in the meantime, we are working with a proof of concept, and it's a proof of concept. It's not live, but there you will be able to test both a wearable, an app, and a card, because I mean these are the dominant ways to have access to your money and make payments. But in the future, you have to have these things technology neutral, right? Because we know that cards and apps are the dominant features at this day and age, but we don't know how we want to make our payments, how we want to hold our values in the future, and the legislation should be able to sort of handle these changes going forward. So the future will tell us.
Okay, excellent. We had also the European Central Bank pushing this topic on the research side. They have created some reports and so on. And there you can find points such as the increase of Europe's sovereignty is also a key driver, which might be related to what you said, Cecilia, increasing the competition. If we are nailing this down to companies, then maybe getting into competition on the payment sector would also have adverse effects on credit card payments, Apple Pay, and all these devices which allow us to pay. Is the thought of increasing sovereignty in terms of payment infrastructure also a thought embedded into the word when you say increasing competition, or is this drive towards a higher degree of sovereignty not so relevant?
I think you can get many different answers to that question depending on which country you are from. We, as a small open economy, we are dependent on being able to make safe and efficient products, payments, both domestically and cross-border. For us, it's not so much a question of sovereignty, but these are things you have to look into constantly. I think what the stable coin concept, and especially the Libra or the Diem consortium is telling the public sector all over the world, is that the financial inclusion in the world is not up to speed. About 1.5, 1.7 billion people on the planet is not sufficiently served with very basic financial services, such as being able to make digital payments. So we have to step up on the public side and being able to both regulate and supervise whatever stable coins that may come in our way and become systemically important. And there is an FSB report that came a couple of months ago that is outlining this in a great way. But not only regulate and supervise what the private sector is coming up with, but also think very hard and long about how do we provide our services to the best of the society.
Okay, excellent. Any thoughts from you, Thomas, on this question of sovereignty of payment systems, or is this maybe, I don't know, a couple of years too far away?
Yeah, I mean, Cecilia made very important points. I think first of all, I think the competition that we are getting from fintechs, from also cryptocurrencies, I think is welcome to the extent that we really have some issues in different parts of the payment system, especially also with cross-border payments. So there clearly need to be improvements. So competition is welcome. I think I always said also for central banks, the important thing just is that it's a level playing field. So it shouldn't be that someone has a competitive advantage because of lighter regulation and so on. So I think that's one of the big issues that regulators and central banks are struggling with. Competition is very welcome, but on a level playing field.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. By the way, just a side remark, there are also private sector solutions really on the rise. For example, Finality, formerly called Unified Settlement Coin, USC. They will also address similar issues, but not coming from the central bank side, more coming from the private sector as companies being set up. Okay, in in the final section of our panel discussion, I would quickly like to discuss it with you. What is the best mode of setting up payments infrastructure? What have been key drivers when you decided to prototype first experiments in your field? For example, how important have been aspects such as privacy, speed of transactions, IT security, interoperability, all these aspects, especially also privacy, we typically hear that they are important for the citizens, for the public, and should be addressed. IT security is a given, that's pretty clear. Interoperability is also a main concern, why people think that, for example, a DLT-based currency might not be the best solution, and so on. Maybe you can dig a little bit more into the questions, what aspects helped you or pushed you with the projects or the prototypes you are currently running. Who would like to start with this question? Cecilia, okay, please.
So a number of questions there. There is a CBDC, what we call a CBDC coalition. It's a number of central banks that published a joint report in October last year, and it can be found on a BIS webpage, for example. We laid out a couple of foundational principles, and some of the things you touch upon, we try to outline answers to. One thing I'd like to highlight is the question of anonymity or privacy. There's a difference between anonymity and privacy. I think as we move deeper and deeper into the digital society, it becomes an important, it is a political issue, really. It's a sort of area where the mandates of the central banker really ends. How much of privacy you should have as a citizen. The anonymity is it's not something that I expect the public sector would benefit, but certainly protecting the privacy of individual citizens is certainly a political objective that I expect we will see much more coming in the years to come. It's not really something for central bankers to decide, but more on the political side. Okay, over to you, Thomas.
Thank you. Maybe just one point, Philipp, that you mentioned the private sector. I think it's clear that the private sector always also plays an important role, and the private sector in the area of payments often took the role of bringing innovation to the sector. So for central banks, it's more the issue of stability and security. So that was clearly one of the important issues for us of the different characteristics that you mentioned. Privacy, I think, is a very interesting question, and as Cecilia said, it is important, but of course it has to be guaranteed that it doesn't hide or give protection to illicit activities. But in fact, not only in the retail area, even on the wholesale CBDC side, there are issues of privacy. Banks usually do not want to have all other banks know about their transactions. So even there, if you look at the Corda solution that we have for our blockchain, it's not like all the transactions are public like you have it, for instance, for Bitcoin. So privacy is clearly a very interesting issue, and it's a difficult issue, especially on DLT, because you have to somehow organize the validation of the transactions without everyone being involved. So these are very interesting technical questions, even for wholesale CBDCs.
Okay, and follow-up question, Thomas. Very often people in the blockchain world try to promote DLT technology because the regulator can also basically instantaneously, like in real time, monitor what's going on in the financial sector once the central bank is also operating, for example, a node and basically reading the passing by transactions to go on and basically monitor what's happening in the market. People say even that financial crashes, which we had in the past, could have been weakened or might have even been avoided when monitoring of the situation in the capital market is happening basically in real time and not without any delay. Is this, Thomas, also a thought of your prototype, or is basically the active involvement of the central bank in the network for monitoring purposes not a plan?
So for us in our pilot, it was not really an issue given the relatively small number of nodes and banks that are involved. But clearly this is an issue that is being discussed, but it then raises exactly the questions of privacy. How much data, how much information should the central bank, should the government have, and what should be left private? So in terms of transaction privacy, there are a lot of reasons why you want to preserve some of the transaction privacy. But I think these are exactly the interesting trade-offs that you have.
Okay, and last question to Cecilia, then I hand back over to Nicolo. Cecilia, have been these involvements also parts of your ideas, like actively for monitoring purposes participating in the DLT network?
You mean being able to monitor people's transaction in real time?
Yeah.
No, is the short answer. That is something you have to be very careful about how you make a setup like that. We have strong regulations in Sweden when it comes to protecting people's integrity, and I expect those to continue or perhaps even go sharper as we go deeper into the digital society. It's not about monitoring the markets or monitoring transactions that we are looking into. It's basically just thinking about how do we fulfill our role in society when it comes to providing a safe and efficient method of money and payment methods and system as technology changes.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because that's exactly matches also the people's preferences, which have been revealed with the recent European Central Banking Survey, where people in Europe found privacy to be highly important. So I think that's interesting to hear. Thank you very much. I think we have some questions from the audience, and that's why I would like to give back the microphone to Nicolo.
Super. So thank you very much, first of all, Christine, Thomas, and Philipp, Cecilia, for this discussion. So I have one question in here. The UK pioneered the use of regulatory sandboxes to facilitate innovation, and a lot of countries have followed suit. Can we maybe see something similar on EU or even transatlantic level? So I think it's more about how are these different countries working together or testing things? So I would first give the word to Cecilia and then to Thomas to answer that. So do you see that there are also that sandbox approach in the EU or transatlantic, or is it more that the countries are doing on their own and just exchanging some information?
I haven't heard of any plans of creating sort of cross-border sandboxes in the way that domestic sandboxes have appeared. It's an interesting thought, so I'll bring it home to my colleagues if I may say so. I think the nearest we get to that sort of things are what is called the BIS innovation hubs, which are a number of hubs situated around the globe. It's going to be one open in Stockholm soon, hosted by the Riks Bank, but managed by the BIS. This is a sort of public sector sandboxes, but it already happens in Switzerland at the SNB, and I know there's a lot of interaction between these hubs and the public sector, in the private sector, and I expect that to continue.
Thank you for that, Cecilia. So, Thomas, what is your thought on that? Do we still need it, or is there still enough, or is there already enough interaction that we don't need that?
I think that Cecilia said it all. The way I would go about is exactly also to have cooperation and collaboration between the different innovation hubs that the BIS is setting up, and we will probably see some pilots and experiments, not just at these regional hubs, but that several hubs will be doing together. So that, I think, is the way forward.
Perfect. So I think Philipp addressed a lot of questions already, a lot of points that covered, of course, not the whole spectrum, but a lot. So Cecilia or Thomas and Philipp will join afterwards the networking room as well. So thank you very much for all you for this interesting discussion. And well, let's see how the topic evolves and in which direction we'll go in the next years. As before.